Hello, Vanakkam, and welcome to yet another episode on Little's Law YouTube channel. Today, we are going to see about yet another logical controller, and that is a for each controller. So this controller is little advanced and it's not like other controller. So I request you all to be little careful in watching the video and also in using this in your script for any performance testing or any functional related testing activities. So this for each controller is more helpful and it brings more value to the script while using it during our testing. So before we see what is a for each controller and how to use it, I welcome you all to Little's Law YouTube channel. If you have not subscribed yet, please do subscribe to our channel, like the video, comment your questions and your feedbacks. So first, let us see what is a for each controller. So for each controller is a controller that loops through the values of a set of related variables. So when we add a sampler to a for each controller, every sample is executed one or more times, where during every loop of the variable has a new value. Say for example, if we have a set of files or a set of activities or a set of URLs to open. So without defining or without giving the exact number of requests that we have, just by defining the value or just by extracting and giving that in the for each controller will help us to navigate through all the pages. So I don't want to confuse a lot. Let's see how to do that with a demo example. So to add the for each controller, we'll need a thread group. So I'm adding a thread group here. Now we'll add a HTTP request. So I'm adding a HTTP request here. And this is the page that we are going to navigate. And we are going to navigate through these URLs. So we have nearly more than 100 URLs to execute dynamically. So all these values or all these URLs we have here in each of the album ID will be automatically navigated, or we are going to see how to navigate that. So this is the page where we are going to extract all these URLs and we are going to do our testing. So let's first add that here. So we'll set up this script here. So now we have got the basic URL, and now let's add our results tree. Let me remove it. So now we have our view results tree to see the response of the request. So let us execute this request and see whether it works fine. So here we could see, so this was the request that we have sent, and that is the file that we wanted to, or that is the URL that we want to access. So we have sent the request. So we have sent the request and let's see the response. So this is what the response we have got. So we are going to access all these URLs using our for each controller. So let's see how to do that in the next steps. So far we have achieved our first step. So we are able to successfully hit the main page and we were able to extract all these in the response. So now we'll have to extract this URL, and to do that we'll have to right click on the HTTP request, and then we'll add the post processor, which is the path extractor, the JP at GC JSON YAML path extractor. So we have added the path extractor here, and let's give the name as URL underscore array. And now we'll have to add the expression to extract the value. So this is what we are going to extract. So anything that comes after this URL is what we are going to extract. So anything that comes between this value should have been taken as a variable. So let's write the expression for that. So we have written the expression. So it starts with dollar symbol, dot, and a bracket, and a start symbol and dot URL. So this will extract whatever value that comes after this, and this value will be passed in the for each controller to navigate in each of the URLs. So to do that, we'll have to add for each controller. So let's add it. So to add a for each controller, we'll have to right click on the thread group, add a for each controller. So that comes under the logic controller, and we'll add the for each controller. We'll move the listener to the end. So now we have the for each controller, and now here we have four different parameters. One is the input variable prefix, and the next is start index for loop, and then we have end index for loop. So in case if we know the start and end of the loop, we can give them directly here. And then we have the output variable name. So this is the value that we are going to refer it with the value that we're going to send as a parameter. So let's now define the places or define the values here. So we'll define this value as URL array, since we are going to refer the URL, and the output variable, we'll define it as URL index, and we do not give any start index or the end index. So whatever value that comes under the reference value, we'll extract it and we'll give it the output variable name, and we check this add double quote underscore and double quote before number. So in case if it is required, so we can use this so that automatically it will be selected as part of the URL. So far we have added a HTTP request and we have successfully hit and got the response. And then we have added a JP at GC JSON YAML path extractor, where we define the variable, the value, which is the URL array, which will extract us the URLs, whatever that are in the results or in the response. And then in the for each controller, we input the value that we get here. Whatever we get in the path extractor, we give this value in the for each controller, and then the output of this variable will be the URL underscore index. So let's now add the next HTTP request where we hit the URLs. So to do that, we'll need to add a HTTP request. So let's now add the sampler, the HTTP request under the for each controller. And here we are going to give this URL index, which is the output of the for each controller in the HTTP request. So far what we did is we are hitting a page which is the JSON placeholder, or the page that we see here, JSON placeholder.typecode.com/photo. So whatever the values, the URL values which we find here, we'll access those values using a for each controller. So we have hit that and we found out it was working. And then we used a JSON YAML path extractor where we extract whatever value that comes next to the URL, and we define that in the URL array. And then in the for each controller, we input that particular URL, and we are giving the output URL as the URL index. And this index value is taken as the input for the HTTP request. And then we'll add a think time so that we don't hit the request back to back with a huge number of requests. So we'll define this as 2 seconds of think time. So now we are set up. So let's now run the test and see how does it work. So everything is set now. And let's run the test and see how does it work. So here we could see the very first page, which is the same page that we are seeing here. And the next page is we are getting the request. The next page is where the value that are next to the URL. So let's see the request. So here we could see that the value that we pass as a parameter here is taken as the request. So whatever value that we extract here, these values are passed as a request to the next HTTP request. And we can clearly see here that for every request we are getting different URL, and these are the URLs that we are seeing in this page. So all these URLs we are clearly hitting them. Again, we have another URL which is the thumbnail URL. So even we can try that, but before that let's see. So we are actually hitting all the URLs here. The test is still running since we have a lot of requests in that particular page. So whatever values which are there, so say for example if we have 100 requests in that page, all those requests will be extracted and those values will be executed in a sequential manner. So that is what this for loop for each controller does for us. So here we could see with different requests with different response, we were able to see that all those pages are getting hit. So this is how the for each controller works. So let's now make a small change and see how does it work. So far we have this URL, which is the initial value. So now let's see how this thumbnail URL works so that we can see how the other one works. So let's paste this thumbnail URL, and in fact I'll reduce this think time to 500 seconds so that we can hit all the requests and see. And again, on top of it, I will add a summary test report so that we can see the number of requests that we have hit on a total basis. So now I have made a small change, which is I have changed this to thumbnail URL and I've added a summary report. So this thumbnail URL will give us this particular, which is a different, the 150 size or 150 pixel size image, which is different from the 600 image. So let's see how does it work. And let's start the test to see how does it work. So here we could see we are getting all the pages successfully. So here we could see that these requests are totally different from what we see in the previous request. So this is how the for each controller works. And here we could see the HTTP2 requests are getting executed sequentially in a back-to-back manner. So this is how the for each controller works. So the purpose of the for each controller is to execute the number of or the requests from its start till its end in a sequential manner. And we can do this both static and in a dynamic way. So for the starting, if we give the index here, it will start from this value and it will end till this value. And in case if we are defining something like this dynamic value, so that too is being handled by this for each controller. Even we can use a CSV, a parameter file from where we can extract this value. Say for example, if I'm having all these URLs and I'm giving this in a for each controller, and if I'm referring it, so automatically that value will also be navigated successfully. So this is how the for each controller works. So in another scenario, if you want to just check the five numbers, the first five URLs, we can even define that. So say for example, if we are starting from the first URL to the fifth URL, even we can define that in the for each controller. So now I have given the starting index as 1 and I've given the last index as 5. Say for example, if we have 100 to 200 requests, but I still want to execute only the first 5, we can try that. So let's see how does it work, and whether we see, and we can also see whether they are executed correctly. So I've started the request. So here we can see the first value is 9C 92C. So let's see here. So again, it is considering it from the 0, 1, 2, 3. So that's why it is hitting, or it is taking the value from the first record. So this is the value 0 and this is 1, and same way it is executing the next values. Let's take them one by one. So initially we started with 716 and then we could see 2, 4, 24. So the second request is 24. So same way we are executing from, so normally it starts with 0, which is the first value, and then it goes to 1, 2, 3, and 4. So that is what is being executed. So the last value which executed ends with 97. Let's check that. So it has ended with 97. And say for example, if we want to run something between 5 to 15, so that is also handled. So any value, any dynamic value, we can easily handle them, and that is how this for each controller works. So any dynamic values will be processed by the for each controller, and any dynamic values is also easily handled by any dynamic, and both the static value is easily handled by the for each controller. And let's try one more thing. So let us start from the fifth to the first. So let's see, start from 0 to 5 to 0. So let's see whether it works, whether this can be handled, to see whether we can use this option. So here we can see the for each controller, it always works in a top down manner and not in a bottom up. So let's have it this way. So 5 to 5, and let's see whether it works. So trying all these options will give us an idea on how does it work. So again, we could see here. So it is very clear that it's not working bottom up or even in the same way. So let's try one more thing. So we'll keep it as 4 to 5 and let's see how does it work. So here we could see clearly again that it always work in a top down manner and not in a bottom up way. So like the other controllers, let's see whether this works with any non-numeric value. Let's see how does it works, because since we saw this option in one of our switch controller videos in our previous videos where we use this value and saw how does it work. So let's see whether this particular option works, or how does it work, or what kind of value does it throw. So here we can see, since this value does not match with any of its variable, it has been taken as a empty or null value, like an empty value. So it started to execute. So now let's try one more thing, which is we will take this particular value, as a starting index. So we'll paste this as a start index, and then we'll extract this particular value as the end index. So same way what we did in the switch controller. If we remember, in switch controller we have given the exact variable which we had in the switch control or the switch logic, and that worked. So let's see, let's try how does it work. So this will give us a new idea, or this will give us a more option to use how to use the test. So initially we tried with numbers in a top-down manner, it worked. And then we tried a bottom-up manner, it did not work. And then we tried with a non-numeric variable, something like a. So it was taken as a default or an empty or null value, and every values or every request started to execute. So now what we have tried is we have taken this first URL, the 0th placeholder, and the first placeholder value. And let's see how does this work. So I'm starting the test now. So this kind of value is not being taken. So let me remove this HTTPS and let's see whether it works. Just try luck here. So again, it is not being considered, or it is not being taken as the proper parameter. And that's how the for each controller. So I believe this video would have been very, very, very useful to you. You might have learned something new today. So with that, we'll come to an end. We'll meet with another interesting video. So mostly that would be again another controller. And if you want to see my other videos on Neoload or Load Runner or API or Git, please do feel free to visit my playlist and my channel. And again, don't forget to subscribe. So there are a lot of more interesting videos coming on the technical and non-technical aspects, which will really impress you and you'll find it interesting. So until we meet you with another interesting video, it's bye-bye from Vasanth, Shanmugam and Little's Law. Thank you and bye-bye.